Welcome, fellow explorers. My name is Christian Alexandersen, and this is Hemlocks to Hellbenders, a podcast highlighting Pennsylvania's parks, forests, and great outdoors. Jacobsburg Environmental Education Center is not what you would call a bucket list park. It doesn't have the activities like Ohiopyle, or the waterfalls like Ricketts Glen, or the scenic vistas like Leonard Harrison or Colton Point. Those are the parks you have to make reservations months in advance for. Those are the parks that hundreds of thousands of visitors vie against one another every year for precious few camping spots or guided tours. They're tourist destinations. Jacobsburg is not, and that's the best part. It is a quiet, unassuming park that has beautiful features and interesting history that is often overlooked, making it a treasure for locals and a hidden gem for those who venture out to eastern Pennsylvania. Jacobsburg Environmental Education Center is a wonderful park that I cannot speak highly enough about. It's got so much in such a small package. In less than 1,200 acres, it's got a top-notch environmental education center, an old-growth forest, a picturesque creek, challenging hiking trails, natural beauty, and a fascinating history. It's a park that deserves your visit. But before you start packing your bags, here's the stats. Jacobsburg Environmental Education Center is a 1,168-acre park located in Northampton County. Available activities include hiking, picnicking, wildlife watching, hunting, mountain biking, horse riding, and cross-country skiing. A notable feature of the park is its Environmental Education Center. Jacobsburg Environmental Education Center derives its name from Jacob Hubler, the man who in 1740 founded the community. Nearby towns include Easton, Bethlehem, and Allentown. You may enjoy the park if you enjoy learning about our natural and man-made history. I'm excited to welcome Rob Neitz to the podcast. Rob is the manager of Jacobsburg Environmental Education Center. Rob, thanks for joining the program.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for asking.
How would you describe the park to someone who's never been there before?
Sure, we're a relatively small park. We're Jacobsburg Environmental Education Center. So we're one of four, possibly six now, officially designated environmental education centers within the state park system. The distinction there is that when we were founded, the idea was, and the focus of our program here was for teacher training, to work with schools, really environmental education. And we're set up as such. We don't have the same infrastructure that, say, other parks do that are set up with a lake and with overnight accommodations, whether it's, tent camping or, car camping or whatever. We're not set up in the same way. So our mission, our goal, while also serving as a park for the local community, isn't necessarily to serve as same way that say some other parks are. We're 1,168 acres, so that may sound like a lot, but compared to some other parks, they're like closer to 15,000 acres in size. We're relatively small. We do have two streams, the Sobers Run and the Bushkill Creek, that run through the park. And we're a mix of a variety of habitats. So we've got anything from wildflower and warm season grass fields to secondary forest to some very remnant, small amount of remnant old growth forest in our Henry's Woods section. Yeah, and we're packed with trails.
What do you love most about the park?
I think I like the diversity that we have here. My two kind of favorite things about the park are some of the smaller trails that run along Sobers Run, and certainly our wildflower fields. I love watching them evolve over the years, seeing how they change from year to year, in not only what exists, so what flowers are there, but how they're coming in from year to year. Is it more robust this year? Is there a more diverse variety of species that exist within the fields at that time? So the wildflower fields and some of the riparian areas are probably my favorite.
Jacobsburg was home to the Henry family. Can you tell us a little bit of the history of the area and how they're recognized in the park?
The Henrys, are known as they were builders of firearms and flintlock long rifles. That gets a lot of the attention. People think of Daniel Boone and going across, Kentucky with his long rifle, and that's where there's a big argument about, is it a Kentucky long rifle, is it a Pennsylvania long rifle that got walked across the border or whatever. But, what I really like about the Henry family, or I think kinda stands out, is the family was really, ahead of their time in terms of conservation ethic. One of their family members, James Henry, was uh, one of the first to propose what we nowadays call riparian buffers. So at that time, there was a lot of clear cutting done for the resources, and he saw how clear cutting and the erosion of the soil was impacting the quality of the streams. And so he was actually one of the first to propose replanting the courses and waterways of Pennsylvania. His legislation made it through the third reading, but never actually got passed. Shortly after that came Rothrock and, all some of the big names of forestry that get a lot of the credit, but it was actually James Henry that proposed that legislation. Along with that, they owned a lot of the property here that became Jacobsburg, and one of the cool things is that we still have a sign that used to be posted within Henry's Woods, and it lists the rules and regulations for utilizing Henry's Woods. And a lot of those rules and regulations look very similar to what we now today have as Pennsylvania State Park rules and regulations. Um, the only sort of difference is they talk about skinny dipping being prohibited and swimming without breeches. Um, so it's a little bit different, but it was pretty fascinating to see that they were very welcoming to utilize their property to the public, but they expected certain things that people clean up after themselves, that they're not drinking here in the park. Um, it was leave no trace before leave no trace had a term, right? So um, I really admire the family from that perspective.
Is there something everyone should experience when they visit?
Jacobsburg is pretty cool, and I guess you can say this about any park or education center, but what makes it special is the change in the landscape and uh, of nature over the calendar year, right? So, coming at any time of the year is great, but really seeing how it changes, it changes the experience. So, when you come in the middle of winter and we have snow on the ground. We hope that we have snow on the ground during the winter time. You can borrow. We have a snowshoe loaner program, and people can come and borrow snowshoes and hit the trail. Um, and we make it available because a lot of people, maybe haven't invested in snowshoes. They've never done it before, so we give them an opportunity to give it a try. And it gives you a real cool experience. It's a different experience. You get that muted sound from the snow, and so it's quiet. There may be a couple birds out, spotting that really red cardinal against the white backdrop of the snow is really special. Um, Seeing the frozen over stream at times is really cool. So that's winter, right? And then in fall and spring, it's always the anticipation of who's migrating through, who's coming to Jacobsburg. In the spring, it's who's coming back, who are our breeding birds that we get to see, our returning friends. And in the fall, it's, again, they're moving through, but they're kind of moving through to get out of Dodge and hit warmer climates. And follow their food source, and that's really cool. All the seasons provide something special to experience at Jacobsburg, and I'm sure it's similar at other parks, but that's that's what I really like.
If a visitor has a full day to explore the park, what do you think they should do? What are some of the highlights they should hit?
Sure. So we're a small park, so spending a full day might actually might actually be a challenge unless you just dedicated to hiking all day long. But you know, certainly hiking multiple spots within the park. Um, everyone visits Henry's Woods. It's a 1.9-mile loop that is set on either side of the Bushkill Creek, and on one side you're walking low along the water, and you have access to the water. It's a very popular spot. It's the most popular trail that we have. I always joke that even if you've never been to Jacobsburg, you probably hiked Henry's Woods Trail without knowing it. it's visited by all those people, and then the second half of the trail brings you up above the creek, so it gives you a little bit different perspective. Um, so you kind of have to hike Henry's Woods. Um, Spend time on the lesser, I would say, visited or known section of the park, a little bit north in the what we call the Sobers Run area. Um, some really nice single track trail that gets you kind of off the beaten path and into the woods. And then on the same section, there's some beautiful single track trail that runs along the Sobers Run. And you can spend time just kind of hanging out at Sobers Run. In the springtime, it's where we get most of our spring ephemerals, which are the spring wildflowers that are here for just 1 or 2 weeks, and then they disappear. Um, and so I just like spending time just kind of hanging out by water. I think humans love and are just naturally attracted to spending time near water. Um, and in the Sobers Run area, you still run into people. It's a small park, and people are discovering us every day. But it's probably less traveled than the Henry's Woods section, and so you get a real opportunity to spend some time just kind of being there by the water.
Rob, did those recommendations change at all for people who are only going to stay maybe like an hour or two?
Yeah, I mean, I would say they still apply. It just depends on what kind of experience you want to have. If you if, and what kind of activity you're into, right? So, if you're birding, you can bird all day, or you can bird for whatever time. If you're just here for a quick hike, um, the Henry's Woods Trail is again, I would make that recommendation. Even though it is our most popular trail, it's the most heavily traveled trail. If you only have a certain amount of time, it's a great trail. It's 1.9 miles round trip. Now, I would say it's also that upper stretch is also say the most challenging. It is one of the more narrow trails. It does sit up along a steep slope, got a lot of roots, some washouts here and there from an erosion from rain and whatnot. So it is our probably one of our more challenging sections of trail. The other option would be, I always make a suggestion. We have a 3 mile loop that takes you through and around our wildflower fields. And the end of summer, beginning of fall is a great time because a lot of the wildflowers are blooming. It's when the monarchs are migrating, so we get some monarchs coming through those fields, and the colors are changing and can provide you in some sections a really nice view of the surrounding hills, the Blue Mountain, the South Mountain, and so you get some of that color change in the woods.
So in 2021, I was fortunate enough to visit all the parks, and after I visited every one, I kind of made a little note to myself that was, I want to come back here again, or maybe this would be great in the fall. In doing research for this episode, I just, went over the maps and the activities and stuff. I was just so blown away by how much there is to do in such a small park. When you have a park like Ohiopyle that's like 20,000 acres, sure, you're going to have a ton of activities. But for you guys that have a smaller park but are just so absolutely crammed packed full of great things that you can do, it made me kind of put Jacobsburg at the top of my list. Like, oh, I'm going there. I got to check that out soon.
Well, so we're definitely a park that's open to a lot of different activities, but we don't necessarily, like facilitate some of those activities. Meaning, if you're a mountain biker, we're open for mountain biking, right? We have almost all of our trails, minus maybe 2.5 miles, is what's considered multi-use trail. So it's shared trail. So if you're a mountain biker, you can mountain bike. If you are an equestrian, we have an equestrian parking lot that can accommodate a horse trailer, and the trails are open for horseback riding. Um, Obviously, if you're just hiking on foot, you can do that. We've got birding. Um, the streams that we have are not really conducive to water sports, as in, bringing a kayak. Um, in the summertime, families like to cool off. I have seen what looks like families like they're going to the beach, inflatables and coolers and things like that. Sometimes I wonder if they get their get wet at all because the stream is pretty low in the summertime. It doesn't really, we don't carry a whole lot of water, so we're not conducive to the water sports, so to speak. But you're more than welcome to wade in there. But we're open for fishing. We're open for hunting in accordance with both the Fish and Boat Commission and the Game Commission rules and regs. Um, So yeah, we try and offer up as much as we can. We are open for that, but we don't have a horseback riding concession, so you got to come with your own horse. We don't have a boat concession. You got to bring your own boat. Like I said, you're probably not going to float. We don't have a bike concession, so we don't facilitate those things, but we are open and available for use in those terms.
I think you have to bring your own horse is just a great slogan for almost any park.
Yeah, but some parks do have a concessionaire that might be adjacent to the park where you can, rent a horse or a ride, go on a guided ride. We don't have that.
The Parks Environmental Center is what I would consider one of the best in the Commonwealth. What can visitors expect to see if they stop by? Do exhibits change or do they kind of remain the same throughout the year?
We say we have a visitor center, and we do, and we have an education center. But a lot of people, when they hear those terms, they think we've got, big time exhibits and a lot of interactive stuff. We don't. There are some parks that have full on walkable through exhibits and things like that. Because of the way that the building was built, and the fact that our interpretive displays and exhibits were put in kind of after the building was built. We kind of had to retrofit into a smaller area. Um, but it does give you a good taste of what's out there in the park and kind of might stimulate you to get out and see it for yourself. So we do have some exhibits that talk about the conservation side, the biology side, the wildlife, natural history side of the park. And then we have some that talk about the history, the nat and the heritage of the park, specifically about the Henry family and some more of their background. Um, we have some beautiful wood carved birds that kind of represent the diversity of species that you might see and some of the special ones that we get here at Jacobsburg. But we're not a museum. So I don't want to give that people the false idea. We're not a museum. We're really here to give people that maybe can't get out into the park an idea about the park's history and natural history, but also to give people that can get out an idea of what they're going to see or what they might be able to see. Um, those exhibits, those professional exhibits are relatively static, so they don't change from year to year. In some of our education, in one of our education rooms, we do have some interpretive stuff that does change seasonally, talking about what you might see differently from season to season. But generally speaking, our interpretive exhibits are what they are.
Jacobsburg offers a variety of community programs. What are some of the events you guys host?
Year round, we host a variety of programs open for public and for the visitors. So I think we started off by talking about how we're an education center, and our primary focus is working with schools and doing professional development for teachers and educators. But in that, we try and bring attention and focus to the seasonal changes and changes to either the plant ecology or the wildlife ecology that happens throughout the year at Jacobsburg. So, you know, we may talk about do some night hikes, talking about adaptations and features of wildlife that come out at night. Um, we have our warm season grass and wildflower fields that do attract a lot of butterflies and monarchs, and the monarch migration is kind of something that we really like to highlight. It's fascinating, the life cycle of the monarch butterfly, but the fact that they migrate hundreds and thousands of miles is pretty spectacular. So we have a program that focuses on that. We do things on the spring wildflowers. We do identifying trees in the wintertime. We do a lot of programming around native plants, and we do a lot of programming on water ecology. So what's in your stream, kind of things. And then it can go anywhere and everywhere. A couple years ago, we did a program on what's called wabi sabi, which is the use of dead plant material to create beautiful arrangements. People don't think about the beauty of something that's dead, but if you arrange it and put it together, it's actually pretty neat. That was a very popular program. We also have a ton of volunteer opportunities for people. It's a great way for local community members to come, kind of help give back to the park and to the education center and connect with other people and stay connected. It's really cool program.
That's awesome. Just the sheer variety that you guys offer is really incredible.
There is, and I'm doing a horrible job of highlighting all that we have. It does change from month to month, based on seasonal changes and based on what our what our staff is currently investigating and into. Um, Here in the Lehigh Valley, we are fortunate that we've got a ton of universities, higher education, um, facilities and schools, and we connect with them in a lot of ways. One of the parts of the mission of DCNR and state parks is to serve as an outdoor laboratory for education. And so we're fortunate that we have a lot of universities that will actually come here and conduct research. The professors are doing long-term studies and they're utilizing their students as, field assistants and things like that. And so one of the things we do like to do is offer programs for the public to learn about the latest knowledge, the latest science, the latest studies that are going on. That ranges from a study in the hybridization of black-cap chickadees and Carolina chickadees. Where we exist in Pennsylvania is we're right there at what's called the hybrid line. Normally, the Carolina chickadees are further south, the black-cap chickadees are further north, and we're kind of right where those two populations meet. We know that there's some hybridizing going on, and we're learning about what that means for the population. Um, we have long-term studies going on our vernal pools. These are seasonal pools of water that attract amphibians like salamanders and frogs to breed in the spring. And they're vernal, they're ephemeral, meaning they're there for a short period of time and then they're gone. And we have some universities that are doing long-term studies on that. So will highlight some of those things. Um, and so that also provides great opportunities to learn some of what's happening right in your backyard and real science, which is really cool.
The park is home to the Jacobsburg National Historic District, Henry's Forge Historic Area, and the Bolton Historic Site. Can you tell me about those places and what makes them unique?
Sure. So, actually, our existence as we exist is largely due to an organization that we work with called the Jacobsburg Historical Society. Back in the 60s, when our Secretary of the Department of Forest and Waters his name was Doc Goddard, they had this goal of putting a state park within 25 miles of every citizen in Pennsylvania. And it was kind of the great expansion of Pennsylvania's park system. Originally, the plans were to put a dam on the Bushkill, flood it, create a lake, have some overnight accommodations and things like that. Well, the local community formed around, the history of the Henry family said, whoa, 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 we've got some important things here, and you're going to put them underwater if that happens. So the formation of Jacobsburg as a recreational park was put on halt there, and the land was preserved, still owned by the state, but then turned into an education center. Um, a lot of the heritage education, the history education, and the interpretation of the Henry family and their history is done by the Historical Society. What does that mean? Well, we've got some old buildings. We've got some historic old buildings like the old office and spring house in what we call the Henry's Forge area. We know that there was an iron forge there. Um, we have on the other side of the park a couple of workmen's houses. Those aren't really accessible from the inside. You can come and see them from the outside. But what we do host is called the Pennsylvania Long Rifle Museum. The Historical Society runs and manages the Long Rifle Museum, and it's a really cool exhibit. Got a ton of the old firearms. It interprets the history of the Pennsylvania long rifle And they do the Historical Society. Um, they do a lot of programming, a variety of programming throughout the year. And the Long Rifle Museum is open when they're hosting programs, typically on the weekends throughout the year. The one thing that I would highlight that they do, which is really cool, it's actually across the street. It's not on state park property. It's right across the street. They have the John Joseph Henry House. It's an old Victorian house, and every year they do a Christmas at Bolton, and it's it's a cross, I say, between Charles Dickens, and Downton Abbey. If they had a baby, that's the experience you're going to have. It's beautiful. They truly deck the halls at the John Joseph Henry House. Um, the ladies and gentlemen are dressed in time period clothing. They have a lot of the clothing from the Henry family that's on bodices and things like that. And it's a beautiful, beautiful holiday event. It's well worth seeing for sure.
There's 19 miles of hiking trails in the park, ranging from easy to difficult. We've spoken a little bit about it, but do you have any other trail recommendations for visitors?
Well, so we did talk a little bit about Henry's Woods, and we talked about our Homestead Trail, which is the one that goes up through our wildflower fields. Um, I do recommend going to the Sovers Run area. Again, that does take you into the woods, up into the hillsides, and can bring you down along Sovers Run. It is 19 miles of trail that's kind of packed into a really small area. So sometimes it feels like you're walking through a plate of spaghetti, and there are a lot of intersections. So it can be sometimes difficult for visitors to navigate their way. Um, we do have great maps. All of the gates that exist within the park are alphanumeric, marked, so you can always reorient yourself. But it is not a just come out and wander around. You need to know, just like you would at any state park, you need to know kind of where you're starting, where you're at to begin with, and then follow along the trail. The other thing that's unique is maybe not so unique, but within the Lehigh Valley, we have a trail network within the Lehigh Valley called the Link. And Jacobsburg is kind of a destination trail along within the Link network. So you can actually go 2 miles north of us along the Bushkill Township Trail, and we're in the stages to connect what's called the Two Rivers Trail, which actually heads south from Jacobsburg down to Easton. There's just two small trail gaps that we're actually working on currently, but the accessibility to other regional trails and to get to and from through Jacobsburg is really, really cool.
In your opinion, what's the best time to visit?
I can't pinpoint a best time to visit. It changes seasonally, and it really is worth multiple visits. You don't Jacobsburg is a little bit different because of our size and because we don't have overnight accommodations. We don't tend to be what I would call a destination park. Ricketts Glen is a destination park. People go there, they camp. There's the Falls Trail, 24, waterfalls. It's something that people will and should travel for to have that experience. Jacobsburg really serves more as a locally utilized park. Um, I know so many visitors because I see them on a daily basis. They're here to get their morning dog walk in or their afternoon dog walk or to blow off steam after work and go for the run. Um, but if you are coming from the outside, it's worth visiting in 4 different seasons because what we experience is different each of those seasons. And like I said, I think we offer everything, for a unique experience each of those 4 seasons. To get the most out of it, your visit, it may be worth looking at our calendar of events, seeing what kind of programming we have, and then coming to participate in a program. Because our interpreters, I've got a very talented staff that they live and breathe this nature stuff that we're sharing with people, and so you're gonna get a really informative program, an entertaining program, and a safe program, and it's a great way to experience the park if, say, you don't want to just go on a trail run yourself or go for a hike yourself. Um, Looking at our calendar of events, picking a program in each of the seasons, and you'll get a full experience.
Can you tell us about Henry's Woods and what visitors can expect on the trail?
Sure. So Henry's Woods was a section of the park that was not logged, meaning that the Henrys kept it preserved. They had a dam on it that they used to supply ice. There was an ice house at one point within Henry's Woods, and they used to love outdoor. We have pictures you can see on some of our interpretive panels of the family having this big Victorian picnic. I mean, they're all dolled up in their suits, and the ladies have their lacy gowns, and they're having a picnic in Henry's Woods, and there's pictures of them being on a boat. And the boat you can actually see if you come to the historical society events. They open up the carriage house and they have their old boat there. But they spend time on the lake that was created behind the dam, and so they really preserved this. And it is, I think I mentioned earlier, there is some remnant old growth trees in there. Now, over the years, I've been here at this particular park for I believe it's 11 years now, and um, when I first got here, we had a series of big ice storms and some pretty heavy storms, and we lost a lot of those bigger trees. They got topped or died in some of that. But what we do have some remnant old growth trees within there, so you can see some pretty big trees, whether it be white oaks or big hemlocks, red oak, and obviously some tulip poplar that have some pretty substantial size to them. I don't want to give the false impression of this old growth forest. We're not like Cook Forest, where they have the cathedral trees, and you're walking through these really big old growth. It is an old growth forest. We don't have that. We have some remnant old growth trees within this area. It is hemlock, it is oak, um, it is well shaded. So, in the summertime, it's a nice place to be. It's a little bit cooler than it is in everywhere else within the park. Um, but it is our most traveled section of the park.
And I know that section's been recognized by the Old Growth Forest Network as having, like you said, it may not be Cook Forest, but it's still something beautiful you're not going to be able to see everywhere all the time.
That's correct. It has been recognized as an old growth forest, and that it has old growth trees within it. Yep.
The park has a butterfly garden and a native plant garden. Why do you think it's important to feature butterflies and highlight native plants for visitors?
Our pollinators, and I think this, information has become a little more out there in society and in the zeitgeist, but we're losing our pollinators because we're losing a lot of our native wild plants. And we want to highlight that you can use native plants and native wildflowers and have a beautiful landscape at home. It doesn't native flowers don't have to be just in the woods or just in the fields, right? You can utilize native wildflowers and native plant species in your home landscaping, and by doing such, we're really helping. I mean, it is a tremendous help. People think, oh, just a little front patch in my yard, what's that going to do? But imagine if every house within your neighborhood had a little patch of native wildflowers. Now you're creating a connected network of food and um, resources for those native wildlife. And we're talking anything from butterflies and bees to songbirds that are going to feed on the seeds that come out of the cone flower, or hummingbirds that are going to visit your bee balm or monarda or bergamot. And so for us, it's really about highlighting the importance of utilizing and preserving native wildflowers and native plants, because not only do you look pretty, and you can have a native wildlife landscaping that still fits within, let's say, a homeowners association's guidelines or things like that. Um, they're not weeds. They're important plants for everyone and everything. And so we want to highlight that it can be done. It can be done in a beautiful way, and the importance that those species play to the overall environment that we live in.
Rob, do you have any tips for people who plan on visiting the park?
Sure, but they're not anything different than, say, you would plan for any trip to any other state park. You make sure you have the basic essentials, make sure you've got water on you, enough water for your hike, a small snack, proper footwear. We're not, you don't have to come on with like full on heavy hiking boots. A good trail sneaker or trail shoe will suffice for most of the park's trail system. Um, Make sure you get a map. There are so many people that come out to the park and then just hit the trails without having any real knowledge of where they're going or, where they're starting. Um, we have maps at every parking location within the park. Make sure you grab one, make sure you know where you are on that map before you head out. Um, and then make sure you're prepared for any weather changes that might happen. And I think most importantly, make sure you take what you bring with you out. The biggest favor you can do for us as the park is make sure that we didn't know you were there, right? So leave no trace, take the garbage with you, clean up after your pets. We welcome pets, we love dogs, but we also unfortunately are plagued with a lot of people that will bring a bag and they'll clean up after their pet. They won't take that last step and make sure that that bag of dog waste gets put in the trash. We find it along the trail, we find it in the woods tossed. We don't want that. We want our every visitor to have an experience that's their own and not kind of infected by someone else's trash. So, do your part, clean up after yourself, clean up after your dog, and everything will be good.
I recently heard it described as don't take away somebody's aha moment to be able to see something beautiful in the wild.
Yeah, that's great, and that's what we're hoping. We're hoping that people come and just have a great experience. I I can't promise that everyone's going to have like a wow aha moment, um, but I can promise that if you head out into the park and find yourself a quiet place, you're going to have a very peaceful experience. You have that ability to have a peaceful experience. And there's nothing worse than kind of having that Zen moment and then just looking down and seeing a bag of dog waste sitting in front of you. Nobody wants that, right? So, do the responsible thing, do the right thing, and clean up after yourself.
Well, Rob, thanks so much for talking to us today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And we look forward to seeing those visitors come and hit the park and leave no trace. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
I want to thank my guest, Rob Neitz, for joining the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook for more information about upcoming episodes. You can support the podcast by buying merch or donating on our website. This has been Hemlocks to Hellbenders. I'll see you out there. Hosting, production, and editing by Christian Alexandersen. Music by John Sauer. Graphics by Uncle Traveling Matt's Random Expedition.